Can the Minnesota Vikings beat the Jacksonville Jaguars and go 3-0 against the AFC South? Well, we're going to find out on Sunday, but until then, we are going to give everyone a reprieve from all the election stuff, and we're going to talk about the Minnesota Vikings and the Jacksonville Jaguars with SB Nation's JP Acosta, and he is a Jaguars aficionado, unfortunately, he will tell you, and one of the smartest ball knowers that you will find on the internet. We're going to talk to him about everything Vikings and Jaguars, including a different scope of the Cam Robinson trade. Strap in, have some fun. Welcome to the Real Forno Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Real Forno Show, hosted by the one and only Tyler Forness. A to Z Sports sought him out to be their Minnesota Vikings reporter and NFL analyst. And he's a proud contributor over at SKOL North's Purple Daily. Tyler is also the captivating host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, and a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Real Forno Show. I'm your host, Tyler Forness, as Dave gets his producer legs under him. With me, as always, in the top left corner is producer Dave. JP Acosta is going to be joining us any moment, and we're really excited to break down this really interesting matchup with I believe the Jaguars are 2-7, but they feel better than 2-7. They also feel worse than 2-7. It is a very interesting Jacksonville Jaguars team where we're going to get the scoop from JP. But Dave, I want to start off the show kind of talking a little bit of injury stuff. The special team is going to look significantly different this upcoming Sunday. Andrew DePaula and Will Reichard replaced on injured reserve, and they signed Parker Romo. And he, apparently, according to Kevin Seifert, he does not want to go by John Parker, just Parker. Fine by me. So we're going to refer to him as that. And he was signed to the active roster with Jake McQuaid, the long snapper, is on the practice squad. So my thinking is they're just going to have him on the practice squad for now because he gets 3 free elevations, and then they'll add him to the active roster probably when somebody else gets dinged up. And that's going to create some interesting elements because when you have the one of the big things with special teams, chemistry matters a lot. It matters a ton. So they're going to need to drill some of that stuff with Ryan Wright and McQuaid. Luckily, Parker Romo has already dealt with Wright as a holder, and that's going to make things a little bit expedited. So you're not going to have to worry about that as much. And I think that is a big thing when you're having that conversation. Now, does that necessarily mean that it's going to be 100% clean? No. And that's the worry, because when you have to replace those guys, things can happen. And we want to prevent as many of those things from happening as humanly possible. So we're going to keep a close eye on that this upcoming week. Plus a couple more injury notes. Blake Cashman finally returned to practice. He was limited today with that turf toe where he's missed 3 straight games. He hasn't played in 5 weeks because he essentially got injured against the New York Jets, and that thing has manifested. Turf toes are weird. Essentially, it's a jammed toe, but they can linger and linger.
It's a sprained toe.
Well, yeah, but a jam is basically like a sprain. When you jam a finger, you sprain it. Like that's kind of it's the same. Like conceptually, basically, you jammed your toe and you sprained it, and that can linger and linger and linger. Some guys end up having surgery to fix it at the end of the year, but it can be a pain in the keister. So having Cashman back would be huge. But his comrade Ivan Pace Jr. did not practice with a knee injury. He was off to the side. He did miss 2 games with the knee injury early in the year against the Houston Texans and the Green Bay Packers. So that's going to be worth keeping an eye on. Brian Flores did say Andrew Van Ginkel got dinged up and was dealing with the thing during the game on Sunday. He did not practice today, but it was not due to an injury designation. It was due to a veteran rest day. Still something to monitor, something to keep an eye on, because if something manifests itself during the week, like that could be a thing. And it also explains why Brian Flores with that explained how Dallas Turner got more snaps. They went with the hot hand, and Turner got in because Van Ginkel was dealing with the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not worried about Dallas Turner one bit. I haven't been worried about Dallas Turner. Everybody was kind of freaking out about it. And, well, we weren't because we know better.
Gotcha.
I'm guessing that means because you changed the screen, that means we have JP in the green room.
That's right. There he is.
Hey, there he is.
Hey, y'all.
How
Fashionably late, of course. Had to get the little Mickey hat going. But how y'all doing?
Good, man. Good. We're excited to talk about the existential dread of being a Jacksonville Jaguars fan.
It's great. It's amazing.
Listen, I'm a Florida Gator fan in the year 2024. I understand existential dread plenty, especially playing in that building. So I want to start here. The Jacksonville Jaguars are a talented football team. They have one of the most talented quarterbacks in the National Football League. They have good players on that roster. They have really talented ones. And yet they keep finding different ways to lose. Where is this team at?
So to me, this feels like a team that is being pulled in two different directions by two butting heads in head coach Doug Pederson and general manager Trent Baalke. So if you've noticed, every time Doug Pederson talks about a loss, it's the players have to do better. They have to be better. They have to execute better, which to some extent is true. But in the offseason, Trent Baalke has been very much like, we have the players to succeed. If we're not succeeding, it's the coach's problem. We have the good players. And I'm not really sure if I fall on either side because I think both are incredibly wrong. But the biggest thing about this Jaguars team is that, yes, they are incredibly talented. They have very talented players. You touched on Trevor Lawrence. Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne are both incredibly talented players. Brian Thomas Jr. is amazing when healthy. Evan Ingram's very good. And the defense has talented players. But when everybody in the league is talented, it's coaching that makes you even better. It's coaching that puts you over the top. And this Jaguars team is consistently poorly coached, and it puts them behind the eight ball. You're constantly punching yourself in the nuts every week when you watch the Jaguars because it's always one self-inflicted wound, and it completely takes them out of the game.
Oh, the self-inflicted wound. That is the worst part. And I think the great epitome of that is this past week's game where they were down 22-0 to the Eagles, and they were this close to being able to take the lead, except a wheel route to Dearness Johnson, which honestly, I don't think was a terrible call, but boy, was the execution poor, and Kobe Dean got a nice little interception. So let's talk about Trevor Lawrence and kind of shift the conversation there, because we know that this team is poorly coached. The presence of Press Taylor is probably going to get Doug Pederson fired again, which is very comical to look at from the outside, frustrating to deal with, of course. Well, what's going on with Lawrence? Because the arm talent is incredible. It feels like he's kind of put this team on his back, and he's not quite been able to carry them as much as you may have wanted or hoped. Am I kind of reading the tea leaves correct there?
You're correct. And I think the biggest thing about Trevor Lawrence, and it's also an indictment of the coaching staff, is their inability to help Trevor improve has been the biggest issue for the Doug Pederson era. So I still think Trevor Lawrence is a very good quarterback, but where he has struggled the most is playing hero ball. He's always tried to make the big play. He's always tried to do that, and it comes back to bite him. Like the wheel route to Dearness Johnson to end the game against the Eagles. It's a poor play call, poor play design. Why are you throwing it to a 5'9" running back? But you don't have to make that throw on 1st and 10 with 1:45 seconds left. It's those types of things where, yeah, Trevor Lawrence is amazing, and you want to always keep him going after and being aggressive downfield. But the biggest thing about Doug Pederson, the era that we are in as a Jaguars fan and for the franchise, is their inability to make players better. There hasn't been a player that Doug Pederson or Press Taylor have drafted or coached that have constantly improved. I mean, the only one that you can really probably say is Andre Sisco. And even Andre Sisco has played poorly this season. Anton Harrison looked great in his rookie year and then immediately fell off a cliff. It's just a very, very odd situation. And I think Trevor Lawrence has become kind of the punching bag for the Jaguars' failures. But if you watch this team play and watch some of the throws he has to make, there is zero margin for error on all these throws. And yes, it's fine to ask Trevor Lawrence to carry you at times, but you got to help him out a little bit.
Yeah, you absolutely do need to help him out. And I'm wondering if Trevor Lawrence is the new Dak Prescott for the ball knower experiment.
Yeah, he is definitely he's the new Dak Prescott, where it's like, I promise you he is good. If you watch the game, he is a good quarterback, but the stats won't show it because, this team has dealt with drops. They've dealt with injuries at the receiver position. He was throwing to Austin Trammell this past weekend, and I don't think Austin Trammell got called up to the 53 on Wednesday, and he was throwing the ball, I think, 4 times. He's playing behind an offensive line that is constantly in flux. And he's being coached by 2 people who cannot put together a good game plan. And that's the biggest problem. Every Jaguars game is the same. They look overwhelmed in the first half. And then the second half, they go to hurry up and tempo, where Trevor is basically calling the plays at the line. And then the offense moves. And then a back-breaking turnover. And it's like, why didn't Trevor Lawrence be better? And it's frustrating because you just know with better execution and a better game plan for maybe like half of the games this season, this team wouldn't be in the place that they are.
Let's kind of shift that, because you talk about kind of how Trevor has no margin for error. And I think one of the things that really can help a quarterback is the offensive line. And Vikings fans know really well, Cam Robinson has come to the Vikings and played really well in game 1. And the only real issues were communication, which you can't expect somebody to have communication with their left guard on 5 days. That'll come in time. And so far, the early results are good, and the coaching staff absolutely loves him, thinks he's just a really smart guy. But having left the Jaguars, where does that leave them on the offensive line? I saw on the injury report, Ezra Cleveland and Brandon Scherff both did not practice today. Are they in a really bad spot?
They've been in a bad spot since like 2020, since the offseason of 2022. So let me just walk you through this entire process for the Jaguars. So in 2021, Urban Meyer's head coach, you draft Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, and then on day 2, you draft Tyson Campbell, Andre Sisco, Walker Little. Walker Little is the name that we're going to be focusing on right now. Walker Little, former 5-star prospect, Stanford, went through a whole bunch of knee injuries, but the hope was you give him reps and develop, he would turn into a quality player. So, mind you, on that same team, you still have Jawan Taylor and Cam Robinson. So, you already have 2 starting caliber tackles and Walker Little. The plan was Cam Robinson would leave after that season, Jawan Taylor might leave, and then Walker Little steps into either of those spots. Well, Jawan Taylor leaves. Cam Robinson does not. And then the Jaguars draft Anton Harrison. So you now have a position where you have 3 tackles for 2 tackle spots. 2023 rolls around. The Jaguars do what the Jaguars do in 2023. And now you go into 2024 with Walker Little and Cam Robinson both on expiring contracts. So you trade Cam Robinson, who's on an expiring contract, to bring in Walker Little, who might be worse than Cam Robinson, but we don't know yet because he hasn't played, and he's on an expiring contract. So you're giving him half the season to figure out if you want to pay him or not, and the whole process has just been incredibly poor. Their entire process along the offensive line has been incredibly poor. As you mentioned, Ezra Cleveland was on the injury report. I think he might play. It's gonna come down to a game time decision. Brandon Scherff has been in and out of the lineup. Mitch Morse has been in and out of the lineup. They just lost their backup guard, Duck Hodges, for the rest of the season. Really bad knee injury against the Eagles. So at this point, and even Anton Harrison left the game, came back with an injury against Philadelphia. So at this point, you might have 2 or 3 of your starting 5 healthy. And again, going up against a Vikings team that loves to bring pressure and stress communication, it's not a good sign. So they're not in a great place right now up front.
Boy, that sounds like a Brian Flores special. But one of the things we saw against the Los Angeles Rams, that also looked like a Brian Flores special, and they did not have a good time. So offensively, from a game plan perspective, if you are the Jacksonville Jaguars, one of the easiest things you can do against the Vikings is just pepper the flats with like quick ones and hope you can get force a broken tackle and get some yards there, or get really good blocking and pepper dagger. Like, are the Jaguars, one, capable of kind of doing those things, and two, is there anything else that you would want to see this team do to attack this Vikings defense?
So I think the thing for the Jaguars is, if Christian Kirk were playing this game, I would say hammer the flats and yards after the catch. This is how this team is built. You have a guy like Travis Etienne, who you might not know if the ball is going to stay in his hands, but when he gets the ball in his hands, he can make people miss. Tank Bigsby has been a pretty good receiver this year. And then Evan Ingram is a matchup problem underneath. They have used him underneath on – they're leveraging his speed going across the field instead of down the field because they want to create those yak opportunities. They've used Brian Thomas Jr. in those areas. Gabe Davis is not going to be used in that area. Gabe Davis is going to be more of the middle of the field guy. If they do try and 7-man protect and use dagger a lot, Gabe Davis is going to be the one running that dig route. The way I want them to attack is you wad it up and you take shots to Brian Thomas downfield. Force the Vikings corners to play one-on-one against your best receiver. You can go into heavier personnel if you want. If you want Brenton Strange in because Evan Ingram is not a blocker, and just attack downfield, which might be the Jaguars' plan considering how weak they are along the receiver room. You might have to end up playing 12 personnel, 12, 13 personnel a lot. But my thing is, for this Jaguars team, I don't know if they're going to do that. I think they're going to end up going to the 2023 Jaguars playbook where everything is just peppering screens, RPOs. You're just poking at this Vikings defense. You're just consistently poking at them. And while I do think peppering the flats is going to work, I don't know if that's the consistent game plan I'd play against them, because the Jets, for the large majority of that game, just peppered the flats. Just continue this check down. And they couldn't get anything going offensively because the Vikings can make tackles and rally up. And instead of getting like 5 yards after the catch, you're only getting 1 or 2. And that's where the Jaguars were left against the Eagles. Every third down was a considerable third down because they couldn't get any yards after the catch. Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be the guy. That is going to be the key to this passing game because he's the only one who can create any sort of separation consistently. So I think I would want them to just go full on attack mode. Trevor Lawrence is very good throwing the deep ball, wad it up, and just go after him.
Yeah, I think that might be a really good option, especially with the year that Brian Thomas Jr. is having, which I think I've mentioned this to you before. That uniform just makes him look small, and he's not small. I don't know. It's the white jersey and the black pants with the black helmet. He just looks small in TV. I don't know what it is.
He looks small, but if he wore the throwback jersey, and I was like, oh, this looks like a dude. And again, he's 6'4", 205. That's a big dude. But the new jerseys don't make him look big. So I'd say I want him to go back to the throwbacks anyway. But if it makes your players look a lot cooler, like Tank Bigsby looks so much cooler in the throwback jersey than he does in any other jersey. And that's another, just go back to the throwbacks consistently. I mean, the Eagles wore the Kelly green against us, and Saquon Barkley reverse hurdled somebody. So it is what it is. They should go back to the throwbacks.
Mm-hmm. Before we move to the defensive side of the football, and yes, 100% move back to the throwbacks. And honestly, they should be wearing the throwbacks against Keenan McCardell, Vikings wide receivers coach. But I want to get your thoughts on Cam Robinson as a whole. You and I have talked privately offline about him quite a bit, especially after the Vikings traded for him. How do you feel about Cam Robinson as a player, and are you happy with the trade?
So I think Cam Robinson is an average tackle. If there are 32 starting left tackles in the league, Cam Robinson falls somewhere in the 16 to like 24 range. It depends on the week. What Cam Robinson does really well, and Vikings fans saw on Sunday, he is a monster of a run blocker when it comes to attacking downhill. There were times where the Jaguars would try and pull him like across the formation and it wouldn't work. But when it's like short pulls, like if you run toss and he's the one coming around the tight end, that's really good. They tried to get into that a lot, and Cam Robinson would just detonate on cornerbacks. I think he needs to be a little helped when it comes to the passing game. I think sometimes he can be beat with speed, but a good coordinator will help kind of mask some of those issues. I honestly think it's a good trade for both sides. Again, Cam Robinson is on an expiring contract. He wasn't going to be in Jacksonville very much longer, especially with Walker Little, who again I outlined is also on an expiring contract. You need to see who is going to be your core players going into the 2025 season, and this will allow the Jaguars to see what they got in Walker Little and give the Vikings an at least NFL average starting tackle.
Yeah, when I was watching his film, I'd have moments where be like, hey, that looks like Christian Darrisaw. One hell of a block. And there'd be moments like, hey, why is Kevin playing football? It's just such a dichotomy of different elements with him. And we've seen good so far. Hopefully he keeps that up. Let's go on to the defensive side of the football, where the Jaguars have some really interesting pieces, especially at edge rusher. Is it Hines Allen or Allen Hines? I never remember.
Hines Allen.
Okay. You have Josh Hines Allen, who changed his name here this offseason as far as public facing, and Travon Walker, who honestly might be like a top 10 running back in the National Football League. Like, how are they so far at getting pressure? How are they playing so far this year? And is it something where they might be able to exploit the likes of Robinson and Brian O'Neill, who I must add, having a phenomenal season?
In order for the Jaguars to win this game, defensively, they need a monster game from Josh Hines Allen and Travon Walker. Travon Walker actually has played really well this season. It doesn't get very much discussed because the Jaguars have been really bad defensively, but individually, Travon Walker has had he's played really well. He's done really good in the run game. He's growing as a pass rusher, and all that growth that he is showing is allowing for him to get double teamed and Josh Hines Allen to be the guy who's single blocked. Josh Hines Allen is still capable of doing some incredible things on a football field. One of the first Jalen Hurts sacks of the game, Josh Hines Allen walks back Fred Johnson right into Jalen Hurts' lap. That is something that we haven't seen very often for the Jaguars, and I think the large part of it is because defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen rotates everybody. So there are going to be times where you just don't know if Josh Hines Allen is going to be in the game. And that's the biggest issue, you know. They signed Eric Armstead in the offseason, and according to Eric Armstead, it was in the contract negotiations, he would play defensive end at times for the Jaguars. So you'll see, against the Vikings, you will see Eric Armstead lined up out on the edge. And every time Eric Armstead lines up on the edge, the offense completely takes off. You can tell, like, oh, Eric Armstead's in the game at defensive end. Yeah, this game is about to get ugly real quick. And they just rotate them. So you never know who's going to be on the field. And I appreciate getting your guys rest. But in crucial moments, you cannot have Eric Armstead on the edge. You can't do that anymore. He is better rushing from the interior, and you're kind of wasting his potential and wasting the defense's potential. So in order for the Jaguars to win this game defensively, it has to be a big Hines Allen and big Walker game, because I'm terrified of how the Jaguars play coverage and playing coverage against this group of receivers.
Oh, man. Eric Armstead on the edge. That sounds like Christmas. I feel so bad for you that the Jaguars have him in that contract. That's like ironclad gross. I want to shift to the conversation about linebackers, because there are some really interesting pieces on that linebacker core. I was really high on Chad Muma. It doesn't feel like he's done a lot. Same with Devin Lloyd. Where are we at with this linebacker core? Are they good, or are they theoretically should be good, but they're not?
So remember the process I told you about for the offensive linemen for the Jaguars? Well, they did it the year after with the linebackers. So in 2022, Trayvon Walker gets drafted first overall. Very good. Then the Jaguars get another pick in the first round. They draft Devin Lloyd. They already signed Foye Oluokun in the offseason. And what the plan was, and again, on day 2, they drafted Chad Muma. What the plan was for Foye to help teach Devin Lloyd how to play the Mike position. And then after the 2022 season, after 2023, Foye leaves, and Devin Lloyd, Chad Muma take over the linebacker spots. Well, the problem is Devin Lloyd hasn't been good. And the biggest issue is he is not a Mike linebacker. He's not at all. He's slow to react at times, and he gets picked on in coverage far too much. And then Chad Muma has been stuck behind Devin Lloyd because Chad Muma also gets picked on in coverage and isn't as good of an athlete or run defender as Devin Lloyd. It has gotten to the point where Ventrell Miller is taking snaps from both Devin Lloyd and Chad Muma next to Foye Oluokun in the defense.
Oh, no.
So, oh, no, but also Ventrell Miller's kind of good. I've been a little surprised with his play. He has been arguably the best linebacker on the team this season. So the linebacker position has been in constant flux, and I think it's largely, again, because nobody on this team has gotten better. Devin Lloyd hasn't gotten better. I think Chad Muma has absolutely not gotten better. And you've created this problem where now you have 2 linebackers on the same contract length and same time period who you don't know are actually good or even good in the positions that you put them in. So it's been really weird watching them play their linebackers because, again, that's another position they rotate. So you might see Devin Lloyd. I think they'll probably start off with Foye and Ventrell Miller. And then you'll rotate and see Chad Muma and Devin Lloyd or Foye and Devin Lloyd. So you're constantly rotating, but when you know Devin Lloyd is in the game, I think that's going to be the time where they attack over the middle of the field.
And with TJ Hawkinson back, that wide choice route could end up becoming a huge factor in this game. Let's move on to the secondary, JP, because Tyson Campbell looks like one of the better young corners in the National Football League. And Ronald Darby just seems to be like a really solid corner, too, going on what it feels like year 40 in the NFL. He just continues to just exist. And Darnell Savage in the nickel still doesn't make sense to me. So I want to ask you about this group. One, is Darnell Savage actually playing well at nickel? And how can the Vikings, 1, exploit this group? And 2, what's the plan for Justin Jefferson?
So I'm going to answer all those questions kind of in the same statement. The Jaguars play a lot of man coverage. They live and die in 2-man, cover 1, cover 2. I think you're going to see a lot of over routes and big posts. That's where the Jaguars have been constantly attacked. If you remember the first big Devontae Smith catch against the Jaguars, it comes on a corner post against Ronald Darby. Ronald Darby has not been good at the corner 2 spot. Buster Brown has played better than him at times, and it's just been difficult finding a consistent corner opposite Tyson Campbell, who is very good until the ball is in the air sometimes, because his problems at Georgia were he was really good up until the ball was in the air and he can't find the ball. Safe to say, those issues haven't really gotten better. So he's still not finding the ball very well, but he's really good in cover 2 and when he's hammering the flats. So I think the Jaguars are probably going to play a lot of cover 2, a lot of Tampa 2 against this defense because they're terrified of playing man coverage. But again, they played 2-man against the Dolphins. And for the most part, I guess that's the only accurate comparison for a receiver of Justin Jefferson's caliber this season. They played 2-man against Tyreek Hill, and for the most part, it went well. There was one big play towards the end of the game, but that was really it. So I wonder if they're going to play a lot of man coverage. I personally wouldn't. But if you don't play a lot of man coverage, you're leaving your linebackers in the middle of those zones. So they don't play quarters. They just don't. They're not a quarters team. They don't play a lot of cover 3. They play cover 2, cover 1, and 2-man. That is the entire book. I would just be worried about the over routes, all the overs and posts against the man coverage, because that's where the Jaguars have been really hurt this season.
I think that's going to be really interesting to kind of monitor how the Vikings will choose to run some of those over routes. They do like to kind of get Jordan Addison isolated on some deep posts and try to split those two mans. And they've been really successful at it. I think Addison's first 3 touchdowns as a rookie were all on deep post routes. I know for a fact that he got one in his debut against the Bucs in week 1 and then the Eagles again on Monday Night Football in week 2. So I'm going to be really intrigued to see how they play it. But a lot of man coverage can spell disaster for a team playing against Minnesota Vikings. The one time that Justin Jefferson saw man coverage, they isolated him and dunked on Samuel Womack for a 43-yard play. So I'm going to be really intrigued. If they do play a lot of man coverage, do you think that they will rotate specifically to have a second guy above Justin Jefferson, or will they just kind of stay in their base coverages and just hope that they're able to kind of man up enough to slow him down?
Well, that's how they played against Tyreek Hill. They rotated a guy over in 2-man, and they'd press immediately. I think that's where Tyson Campbell is at his best. But Justin Jefferson is a lot different than Tyreek Hill when it comes to getting off of the press. And I think they're going to go to that just to kind of disrupt the timing a little bit and keep a guy over the top and force Sam Darnold to throw into tight windows. So I wouldn't be surprised if they rotate a guy over in man coverage, and they like playing that trail technique where they'll press him, and then the corner will play underneath on the inside hip while the safety plays over the top, and that way they kind of squeeze it.
That's going to be a really interesting one to watch. Overall, JP, what are a couple things that you're really worried about this Vikings team being able to exploit with the Jaguars? I know we've kind of talked about multiple areas and pretty much every layer of this Jaguars team, but this Vikings team 6-2, they're still still the number 1 defense in EPA per play. I think they're also still number 1 in dropback EPA per play. Well, at least they were going into week 8, and they can generate explosives and prevent them really well. What really concerns you about this Viking squad?
Well, for the Vikings up front, first of all, I think this team is incredibly coached on both sides of the ball. They have incredible game plans week in and week out designed just to poke at every single thing that an offense or defense does poorly. From the Vikings offensive perspective, I always enjoy how Kevin O'Connell designs routes for Justin Jefferson. It's like having a great basketball player, and you don't just go throw the ball to him and say, hey, go get a bucket, which you can, but you want to get him off of screens. You want to get him off pin downs. You want to try and get him in the pick and rolls against favorable matchups. And what they do with Justin Jefferson in terms of motion, getting him into what I love about the Vikings, they use a lot of tight stacks, bunches, which is going to be a big point against the Jaguars' man coverage. Because of how much man coverage they play, getting into tight stacks, bunches, it might disrupt their ability to press out of it. So be on the lookout for Justin Jefferson kind of coming in motion, but stopping right behind a receiver in kind of a stack. And that way you're getting him free releases, one, but also getting him away from Tyson Campbell, because I think he's going to see a lot of Tyson Campbell. But their ability to run the ball has also really been impressive, and it's helped Sam Darnold not have to be Superman all the time. Aaron Jones has been amazing in his role, his ability to affect the run and passing game, but also he presses the hole, but doesn't overrun it. He's not going to be super agitated towards. He's patient in those areas, and then he's explosive. So that's where the Jaguars really have been bad, which is defending explosive plays. So that's the biggest thing I'm worried about: explosive plays out of bunches and stacks, and just not being able to make life difficult on Sam Darnold when it comes to pressure. The Jaguars don't blitz a lot. They're going to play 2-man, and I wouldn't be surprised if Sam Darnold sometimes uses his legs a little bit in scramble situations. Defensively, I am terrified of all the various ways they can blitz and play quarters behind it. And the reason is because Trevor Lawrence does so much at the line of scrimmage, where he's getting them into protections. He'll change the play. He'll change routes up. That chess match is going to be really fun to watch. But I also am worried about an inexperienced an offensive line that hasn't really played too much together, going up against this defense who, even without the blitzing, John Grenard has played really well this season. I think Andrew Van Ginkel's a really fun player.
Mm-hmm.
I'm worried about that, but I think that if Trevor Lawrence plays, he's been on the injury report. They just added CJ Beathard. I'm cautiously optimistic he's going to play. It would be surprising if he doesn't, but it's something that I would just monitor. If Lawrence, he took a big hit to his throwing shoulder against the Eagles, and they took him out. And for a second, I thought Mac Jones was going in, but be on the lookout for that. If Trevor Lawrence ends up playing, what's the arm velocity looking like? Because his shoulder might be still less than 100%. But if the Vikings are going to be able to win this game, they're going to have to get consistent pressure. And that's something they've been able to do a lot. And that's something that I still think they can do against a Jaguars team that has shown an inconsistent ability to pick up blitzes.
Yeah, that's going to be a really fun one to watch, especially because it looks like Blake Cashman is going to return for this game finally, and he has been such a massive difference maker in all facets, really, being able to blitz effectively and in run defense, especially in coverage in the middle of that defense. And let's be real, Ivan Pace Jr., he's like Mighty Mouse. He is not a coverage guy. He's going to run forward and kick you in the keister. Let's bring in producer Dave here. Dave, do you have any questions for JP, good sir? There he is.
I'm here. Been watching. Not related to the game, but related to the Jaguars. When does the new stadium construction or the modification start?
So I believe they said they start in 2026. I think it's between 2026 and 2027 that they will be playing, I think, in Orlando for those couple of years, and then the new stadium will be done in 2028. Let me check just to make sure, but
that sounds right because Florida Georgia's not playing those 2 years in Jacksonville.
Yeah, so they will be gone they're not going to be playing in Jacksonville from, I believe, 2026 to 2027, and then they'll be back in 2028.
So Pederson will have no chance of ever seeing that new stadium.
Oh, I hope not. I really hope not. You never know with this Jaguars team, but I really, really hope, for my sanity, that Doug Pederson and Trent Baalke both never get to see that new stadium.
All right, one last question. One of the viewers asked, would Trevor Lawrence play better if he had a quarterback whisperer as a coach?
So I think he would. And I think the thing about Doug Pederson that people are going to be like, well, Doug Pederson was a quarterback whisperer. Doug Pederson has always had a weird thing for Press Taylor and letting him call plays. And then when things go wrong, it was a good play call. Players got to execute. Instead of, why are you throwing a screen pass on 3rd and 1? It's always been that. It was that in Philadelphia, which got him fired. It's going to be that in Jacksonville when he eventually gets fired. So I think Trevor would be better with a quarterback whisperer, but I'd want it to be somebody who has spent a lot of time around the modern football game. Doug Pederson, last coach before he took over the Jaguars in, I think, 2020. I think the first half of 2020, then Nick Sirianni took over. But it feels like the offense is in need of new ideas. And the offense has been so unprepared, so archaic and stale that they haven't really been able to do anything. So I think Trevor Lawrence will be better under a quarterback whisperer, but I think it would have to be someone who has worked with the modern NFL game. I mean, everybody likes to talk about Ben Johnson. I think he'd be a fantastic hire for the Jaguars, but everybody's going to try and hire him. I'd say a guy like Zach Robinson from Atlanta, what he's doing with the Falcons offense would be really fun to see in Jacksonville, the pieces they have. Drew Petzing out in Arizona would be pretty interesting. Liam Cohen, I don't know what happens if Tampa misses the playoffs, but if Liam Cohen isn't going to be the next Bucs head coach, I would love for him to be the Jaguars head coach. But those guys who have spent time around the Shanahans and McVays, I want someone like that for Trevor Lawrence.
Gotcha. Cool.
Oh man, Zach Robinson with Trevor Lawrence. That would be as an outside observer would be fun as hell.
I'm just imagining, we need a power slot, but just make that Evan Ingram, like that Evan Ingram could fill that role. And you have Brian Thomas Jr. already. I think Tank Bigsby is amazing. I think Vikings fans are going to really have fun. I know he's going to play for the Jaguars, so it's not going to be fun, but Tank Bigsby is an incredibly fun player, breaks so many tackles. ETN has kind of been phased out of this game plan, which makes me believe that Travis Etienne will not be around on the Jaguars for much longer. But Tank Bigsby is incredibly fun. They have these talented players, but it always feels like the coaches are deploying them in the wrong situations.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and when one of them is Press Taylor, and it's not really too much of a surprise. JP, I'd like to hear your prediction of this game. It's obviously in Jacksonville. I think the Vikings are favored. I want to say by like 4.5 or it's by 6. Ooh, oofta. How do you think this game ends up going down?
I think it was 6. That may be wrong.
So I think it depends on if Trevor Lawrence is healthy enough to play. If he doesn't play, the Vikings should beat this team by like 30, 40, 30 plus. This game should be over by the first drive of the game. If Trevor plays, I think it's interesting. I've always said if a team is serious, they should beat this Jaguars team by a considerable amount. And I think the Vikings are a serious team. I would say over, just because I'm unsure about Trevor's injury, 1, and 2, their ability to stop this offense.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. I think the Vikings should win by a touchdown plus, but you just never know with some of these inconsistencies we're seeing with Sam Darnold, which honestly, Kevin O'Connell kind of gave him a pass for his interception. The second one where Nick Cross was the flat defender and ended up 20 yards downfield to intercept that dig route. He wants him to be aggressive. He wants him to try and generate those explosives, but it's just understanding when you need to check it down. I don't know if Sam Darnold has that gene in him because he just keeps wanting to push, and that might be where the Jaguars can take advantage. JP, my friend, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Where can the people find you and your stuff, and tell them about one of my favorite series out there, Establish the Fun?
So Establish the Fun is a column I write at SB Nation. I am an NFL writer. I am an NFL draft writer. I'm a college football writer. Anytime or anywhere where there's football being played, I'm probably there talking about it. Establish Fun is my little way of saying, hey, these are some cool things happening around the NFL. I like sharing that stuff. And I think football is fun, and we're establishing that every Wednesday on SB Nation. You should check it out. But if not, follow me on social media at Acosta32_JP. See what I'm doing, see where I'm going.
Cool.
Beautiful.
Tyler,
Dave,
you were right.
Anything else?
Yeah. The Vikings are only favored by 4 with a 45.5 over under.
I figured it was a little bit lower than 6 just because, road game, it'll take away 2.5 points. I figured about 7 neutral field made a lot of sense. Do we have Scolders and Spice tomorrow or Friday?
We do. It's 7:00.
Perfect. Make sure you like, subscribe, and ring the bell so the second we go live, you'll know that we are ready to rock and roll, especially on a day like today where there's 2 shows. Go check out Who Will Be King earlier in the day. And don't forget, 2 all bloggers. Darren has decided to make it 2 weeks in a row. Let's see if he can do 3 this upcoming Saturday. And then we will be around for the post-game show. And you know what? I may have a podcast or 2 coming up this week too. I don't know. I feel like talking. So we'll keep an eye out for that. Till then, JP, Dave, I'm Tyler. SKOL Vikings, everybody.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Forness and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching The Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone!